was another disappointing loss for the Raiders. They fall to 4-5 on the season after dropping a home game to the Vikings. And this is definitely probably the worst performance they've had since Week 1's disaster against Cincinnati. The Raiders just look completely unprepared for this game. A couple things stood out to me. Obviously, a lot of people were hurt. Rodney Hudson wasn't there. Helu wasn't there. You had a whole bunch of dudes who were just sitting out. So I think that's a huge part of why the Raiders weren't able to kind of put it all together. Derek Carr, eventually, yes, he did get rolling, but was way late in the game. Cooper and Crabtree really weren't, getting the numbers up as we've seen in previous games. The run game, just kind of there. It definitely did not really set the tempo like it has in some of the earlier games. And when I look at this game, if you would have told me that Derek Carr would have had 300 yards passing and Terry Bridgewater would have had 140, 150, I would have said, okay, there is no way the Raiders lose this game. Well, then you turn around and you show me the rushing numbers, which has been the exact opposite of the defensive problem throughout the year. The Raiders actually did a pretty good job shutting down the pass, but obviously Adrian Peterson just ran all over them. They had 250 yards plus in the win. Raiders barely could get 100 on the board. So that's actually a really, really big problem we haven't seen from the team so far this year. And that's just a huge, huge hole in their run game. So, what do I make out of all of this? Well, you had Denver lose, so they lost some ground. And that puts them at, 6-2 or 6-3, which, is not bad. I mean, we can take that. I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle for sure with the way Denver's playing. You never know. I'm a little concerned about Kansas City, though, because they're starting to play a way, way, way better. So that definitely does seem problematic. So really, the fate of this team, it's so uncertain. You got Pittsburgh coming back and they're winning their game. They're jumping out to a lead in the playoff, the wild card race. You saw Buffalo win, so they're jumping out. So you really don't know. I mean, the Raiders, it's very simple. You got to win games. And games like this, these are the ones that really are going to hurt you. I mean, the Vikings, they're turning out to be a really, really good team. At this point, they might even beat the Packers in winning the NFC North this year. So obviously, they are very well structured. But at the same time, the Raiders, I think they really just should have put up more points. This should have been a much, much closer contest. But like I said, it's one of those things where if the Raiders, when they click, they're just loading points. It turns into NFL blitz. But when they can't get it going, when they're just going 3 and out, when Latavius Murray isn't, really getting the run game going and setting up the pass, the team just kind of stagnates. And that's the big problem with the team offensively, because they do have a lot of firepower, but before you can fire the cannon, you got to light the match. And this is one of those games where they just took a long, long, long time to find their proverbial matches. Okay, so like I said earlier, this puts the team at 4-5. Coming up next week, they've got a game against Detroit, which should be a win. That should bring them back to 500. And then you're going to Tennessee on the 29th, which also empirically should be a win. So hopefully, the Raiders, they come back on their next 2 games, they get above 500, 6-5 heading into the December stretch. But like I said, you really can't rule anybody out. Any given Sunday in the NFL, stranger things have happened. And, the Lions, they beat the Packers, the Titans, they're playing pretty good after, that really sucky stretch for a couple of weeks. So nothing is a given. I want this team to go 6-5, but is it possible the team to drop down to 4-6 or 4-7? Yeah, absolutely. Which is why this team has got to watch it. You got to get the defense going. You got to improve the rush. You got to get the running game going. And Derek Carr's got to find a way to hit his receivers earlier in the game. We saw that in the Jets contest. We saw that in the game against the Chargers. If the Raiders put up a lot of points early, they win. And they win easily. So that's pretty much the strategy going forward. We'll see. Tough loss, but season's not over. We still got a month and a half to play. And as we all know, stranger things keep happening. So stay tuned.